it's not really a good idea to tell an angry young man what who's been kicked from pillar to post all his life, what he can and can't do. So, I mean, the first time I took crystal meth, I thought I'd come home. I thought this is what it's supposed to feel like to live life. I wouldn't have ever said that I had anxiety, but looking back, I think all traumatized kids grow up with a low level of anxiety. It's always there under the surface, and addiction's the same. You learn that to bury all your woes in life, you just take this substance and it puts you back up, and you eventually end up in a state where you're afraid to come down, and you're afraid to come down, and your life turns to a shambles because you're not going to be doing the washing up or your hoovering, and it culminated with me trying to crawl across a wire cable that was strung between two tenement blocks. So we're talking sort of 70 meters above the ground. I was just utterly convinced everything in my life, my commando training, everything had primed me for this moment to crawl across this cable. When I got to the other side, everything was going to come good. It was going to be like a homecoming on steroids. There was going to be everybody that I'd ever met there, and they were going to welcome me home from these challenges that I'd had and said, well done, Chris, you've come through this. We're essentially, carbon molecules held together by energy. So you are me, Andrew, and I'm you. We're just the universe experiencing itself subjectively. So the notion that I would go to war with you or fight you is so ridiculously, nonsensically stupid that any enlightened person understands this is the challenge that humanity has been set.
Hi, my name's Andrew Payne and welcome to Men on Show, and today I am delighted to welcome Chris Thrall to the show. He has travelled to 80 countries across 7 continents, run 999 miles, the length of Britain, unsupported, completed a quadruple ironman triathlon. He's a qualified pilot, skydiver, bestselling author, Antarctic explorer and polar scuba diver. I am feeling cold already. He's the English Veteran of the Year, and one of the stories which I definitely will ask him about, he's driven volunteer journalists to India and back in an old school bus to highlight global inequality and poverty. That sounds like a great story that I want to dive into, which we'll do later. He was awarded the 2nd level commendation of the Finnish nation on the grounds of human generosity for his ability to inspire others. Chris, welcome to the show.
How have you been doing?
Really good, really good. We've got a new puppy actually, so hopefully she won't sort of howl and whimper too much on the podcast. She's sort of at my feet, gnawing my toe. But yeah, no, we're really good actually. It's good to have her. Just so you have an incredible action-packed, adventuring lifestyle and a CV of stuff on it that so many of us would probably love to have on our own CVs. Who or what inspired you growing up, and has that sense of adventure always been in you for as long as you can remember?
So my biggest inspiration in life was and always will be Tarzan.
Right.
I think we were so lucky as youngsters that we hit a sort of sweet spot in the mainstream media before it all turned quite sick and evil. And we had the pleasure of watching Tarzan on Saturday mornings, and I got a lot from that, Andrew. I mean, first of all, Tarzan always looked after his boy. That to me has always been the real sign of a real man. And Tarzan wasn't afraid of anything, and Tarzan adventured, and I'd watch my episode of Tarzan on Saturday morning, and I'd unzip my tracksuit top down to the navel, grab my lasso, and I'd go down to the local river and lasso things, and in my mind, I'd escaped into Tarzan, and I don't think I ever stopped.
Amazing. So, and that, I mean, at some point, I imagine you sort of progressed from Tarzan, you start watching other stuff. Was there then a steady progression into the Marines? Or was there a particular moment where you felt a calling?
No, I was homeless for the second time in my life at 17, which kind of gives your listeners an idea of what my childhood was like.
Wow.
Very extremely turbulent, you could say, and yeah, as a result, there I am living in a Renault 12. One of my friends came up and knocked on the window one day. His dad was in the Royal Marines and was fought in the Falklands conflict. And he said, I've just been to Lympstone Commando, the Commando Training Centre, and I've done this 3-day course. It's called the Potential Recruits Course. And they put us through hell, and we had to do this and we had to do that. And out of the 30 guys that started the course, only three of us got through. And he said, and now I'm in the Royal Marines. and then he looked at me and said, but of course you could never do it. And it's not really a good idea to tell an angry young man what who's been kicked from pillar to post all his life, what he can and can't do. So I took up his bet and I joined the Royal Marines. It was that simple, really. And as someone who was completely lost in life, I tried to retake O levels in college and failed. I tried to become an electrician, and I just was despondent that no disrespect to our wonderful electricians out there, but I just couldn't believe, is this going to be it? My whole life crawling through loft spaces trying to route cables. And I ended up working in a hire centre, which actually I sort of quite enjoyed, but it obviously wasn't really going to go anywhere. And when I read through the recruiting literature, I wasn't thinking about fighting at that stage or killing people. It was more that you need to be able to do 50 press-ups, you need to be able to do a certain amount of pull-ups, you need to be able to run a mile and you kind of take it that one stage at a time, and it suddenly opened up this avenue that I hadn't even considered I might be able to access anymore. And on top of that, I think they paid you £150 a week, which 35 years ago was that was a decent old salary.
I mean, in that moment in that car where you, as you say in your own words, you've been kicked from sort of pillar to post, homeless at 17. I mean, that's so incredibly tough. To have had that kind of comment, I mean, that really could have gone either way. Was there something, do you think, in you that meant you went the way of joining the Commandos rather than just being kicked down even more?
So the funny thing was, before that, I'd been into the RAF recruitment office, and I was just looking to escape, Andrew, into any avenue that could provide me with a better life than the one that I had, and some sense of direction and some money, of course. And the RAF recruitment officer, after giving me an interview and asked me what this plane was and what that plane, I had no idea, and he could tell immediately I wasn't invested in this, and he said, no, we don't think the RAF's for you. And he said, we don't think you would stick out the training. So that was kind of, looking back, made me smile. But no, the Commandos doesn't make anyone. You've either got it or you haven't. Why some people have it and some don't, I honestly don't know. I can't obviously speak for everybody, but I can speak for a lot of people like me, and there's an awful lot of traumatized, there's an awful lot of service personnel in the elite forces that were traumatized as children. And as you can see from my story, when a golden paddle, what appears at the time, because I I joined at 17. I mean, I went down to recruiting office at 17. I was a child, you know, um, and it's like I say, it seems a shining path for people that, you know, have got low self-esteem, or I don't know if I had low self-esteem, but I just had a sort of low self-image of what I was capable of, and then suddenly there's an opportunity in front of you, and for me it was not just an avenue to work, but also an opportunity to show all those people that I felt had put me down and kicked me around and told me I was a loser and a failure, and I'm not saying, you know, obviously now at 54 years old, we that's not how we get our gratification in life. But it certainly was as that, you know, troubled 17-year-old. But when you're, you know, when you're in the forces, there's no psychological stuff. As if you were to go to, say, a coach in the gymnasium, he'd be saying, "Come on, Andrew, you can do this. Come on, knock out. Give me some more press ups." And they would realise that a lot of it is psychological. That are barriers in life. In the Marines, you've got nobody there saying, you know, you can all do this, fellas. There's millions of people who've done it before you, or, you know, hundreds of thousands. It's only 30 miles across Dartmoor. It's not, you know, you're not running an ultra marathon every day, the length of the United Kingdom for 36 days. I think I I did later in life. They don't do that. What they do is the opposite. That at every moment you're made to think you're the weak link, you're a failure. They don't really want you, and you have to prove that you've got what it takes to get in. And that even that psychological process is you know, everybody in your troop. So we joined with 55 people. 3 people were too scared to get off the train. And obviously that 55 got whittled down somewhat over the next 8 months, and every one of those 53 people thought they were the weakest link, and that the training team had their eye on you. And I guess that's a good strategy in itself, because you've got to overcome that psychological fear that you're not wanted, and or that you're not good enough, but you keep trying. And of course, you know, by keep trying, you put a supreme amount of effort out of the bag. I remember running back from the endurance course on my commando tests. So that's a 2.5 mile underwater course. A lot of it's submerged tunnels and dips that they push you through underwater, and then you have to run a 4 miles back to camp, and that's not to mention that you've already walked 4 miles in full equipment up to the beginning of the course, or certainly in your fighting equipment. And I remember running back, and I was just spent. You come out of those water obstacles. We had to break the ice because it was February. You literally feel like you've doubled in weight with the water inside all your kit and your clothes and your boots, and you've got to shift yourself up these steep inclines. And I came off that course, and I'm starting to run back to camp, and everything in me was just saying, give up, just give up. They don't want, you know, what are you even thinking? Why did you think a career like this was for you? You know, you failed everything. And I just thought, you know what, I've come too far to give up now. It would be crazy to give up now. And I just started putting one foot in front of the other. Again, there was no one there spurring me on. There was no corporal with his arm around me going, "Come on, fella, you got this," you know. That you do get that at times, but but on that one, I mean, it was just me, and I put one foot in front of the other, and then I put the other in front of the other, and the other, and the other, and before long, I was getting up quite a pace. I was really even surprised myself, and I ran all the way back to camp at as fast as, you know, my little legs would carry me, and that is, you know, this is what we need to pull out of ourselves. And on top of that, we had a troop officer. We're still friends to this day. A chap called Jock, and he led from the front like a man should. And when we did that endurance course, even though he didn't have to, when we were being shown around the obstacles, he's like, I won't swear on your show, but he's like, right, down he just strips off his t-shirt, puts his combat jacket back on, jumps down in this pool, and the corporal shoves him through this underground culvert. This is called the Sheep Dip, if I remember rightly. And I thought, you know, that's what a hero looks like. But yes, it's within us, Andrew. You know, it's within us. The military doesn't make anyone really. I don't think it gives you a great experience. It presents you with the experience to learn some life skills. I mean, it you know, they do teach you how to polish your boots, keep your bed space clean, and that's stuff that we all, or most of us, carry on into later life. But it's almost like they provide you with the opportunity to do the work yourself. That's what I would say.
Yeah. I love that story of leadership there, where, you know, if you never think that you're too sort of high and mighty to get down and do the things that you want other people to do, and lead by example. It's just so important. You talk in your second memoir, you talk about your challenges with addiction. What were those challenges? Did they surface during your time in the Marines, or was that something you faced when you came out of the Marines?
Yes, so addiction, for the most part, not always, it's symptomatic of unresolved childhood trauma. So essentially, you start a behaviour. In this case, you know, it could be drinking, or it could be other drugs, and in that moment, because you get high or tipsy or whatever the case may be, you're falsely elevating your sense of self. So you're kind of burying that trauma while you're under the influence of this substance. And I always describe it as, I mean, the first time I took crystal meth, I thought I'd come home. I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like to live life. I mean, I wouldn't have ever said that I had anxiety, but looking back, I think all traumatized kids grow up with a low level of anxiety. It's always there under the surface. It's always, you know, making you possibly slightly sort of, I don't know, insecure in every scenario that you come across in life. And when you take a drug that suddenly wipes that out, and you feel utterly incredible, you feel invincible, that you can nail anything on this planet, and you start learning about yourself and things that you're capable of. All the stuff they said you're a failure at in school, you find out, no, I'm actually, you know, I can turn my hand to this. I've just never been supported to do this. And it's a powerful thing. And the problem, Andrew, is what happens is, not only is where there's a high, there's a come down. So you feel, you know, 1 minute you're feeling great, and slowly, and suddenly you're in this miserable state of mind. So what do you naturally do? Well, you naturally chase chase that substance again, because you want to get yourself back up high again. And then of course you have to take a little bit more, because the chemicals in your brain have got a little bit, they've got a bit used to it now, so you've got to take a bit more to get that high. And every time you crash, you go low, you go a bit lower, and your life starts to spiral out of control, because you're not going to answer the mail that's on your doormat when you're feeling absolutely, it's not even, having a hangover's bad enough. It can be even worse when you haven't slept for 9 days on crystal meth and you've danced in a nightclub, literally all night long until dawn, while you were high, on top of not eating really hardly eating a morsel for 9 days. It sounds incredible, but it's true. And what happens is this, it's like the rats in the cage that get given the food pellet, laced with cocaine or whatever. They tap that button, they get a food pellet. They tap the button, they get a food pellet. They tap the button, they get a food pellet. When you take those food pellets away, what does the rat in the cage do? Well, it taps the food, it taps the button again, because it's a learned psychological condition. And addiction's the same. You learn that to bury all your woes in life, you just take this substance and it puts you back up, and you eventually end up in a state where you're afraid to come down, and you're afraid to come down, and your life turns to a shambles, because you're not going to be doing the washing up or your hoovering or functioning well at work when you're on a come down. To the same extent, when you get so high, you can get pretty, you're not firing as well. So that was it for me. And you asked, when did it start? I'd been out. We'd all been to a few. Well, not all of us, but there was quite a. They can say Marines are alpha males. So if there's a party, they're going to be there shouting the loudest, dancing the hardest, consuming the most beer or whatever it is. And so we used to go out dancing a lot, and it was great actually. Some of the guys I used to go out dancing with went on to achieve the highest, accolades and medals and stuff in the Marines, which always makes me smile. All ended up as senior officers, but it was in Hong Kong after I left that things started to cave for me. I went out to Hong Kong to run a business that was turning over about $100,000 at one point. By the time I got out to Hong Kong to run the business properly, it all but collapsed for reasons that weren't really, strictly my fault. And it was a strange place to be. I took a series of weird jobs, and I guess I just was isolated, probably lonely. And when someone said, "Hey, try this stuff here," and it was crystal meth, I thought, yeah, I'll try that. I've done a few bits and bobs before. It's never been a problem. And like I say, that one was the key in the lock for me. It was just, oh my gosh, I've come home. And before long, I just wanted to smoke that stuff every day of my life. I just didn't want to be normal. And it culminated with me ending up working in a nightclub run by the 14K, who are one of Hong Kong's biggest triad criminal family, or crime families, or brotherhoods I should say. And whilst working for them as a nightclub doorman, I started to experience severe psychosis. So I was, literally losing the plot, Andrew. I was kind of hearing voices, you could say, albeit my own voice, but hearing it in out of context. And I was utterly convinced that there was some kind of deep, dark conspiracy going on in Hong Kong that possibly led around the world, and it was weird. I was just living in this bizarre double world where people around me didn't, they knew I wasn't like my usual self, or the way that I was when they'd met me, but they had no idea of the confusion I was in. And it culminated with me trying to crawl across a wire cable that was strung between two, I call them skyscrapers, but really they were tenement blocks. So, we're talking sort of 70 meters above the ground. I was just utterly convinced everything in my life, my commando training, everything had primed me for this moment to crawl across this cable. When I got to the other side, everything was going to come good. It was going to be like a homecoming on steroids. There was going to be everybody that I'd ever met there, and they were going to welcome me home from these challenges that I'd had and said, well done, Chris, you've come through this, And in a moment of clarity, I just suddenly realised it wasn't so much that I realised what I was doing. I was staring down at the cars and the people down in the street. They just looked like ants, toy cars. And a thought came across my head, who put this wire up here? It's not like in the Marines where everything's checked and double checked, and you know that the person that would have put this wire up would have done a proper job, because everyone else in the the company or the unit or the troop is relying on them. I was thinking this could be some cowboy Hong Kong builder, and here I am. I'm just about to crawl across this chasm. And then I thought, well, and why am I doing it? What am I trying to prove? And who am I trying to prove it to? Because I don't prove myself to nobody in this life, nobody except my kid brother. And that was it. And in that moment, the floodgates opened, and I just had this download of emotion, crying my eyes out. My tears were just dropping into this dark void, and I was watching them disappear down to the street. And I went back to my room, and then I got really angry. I was living in this crummy apartment on the top floor of this tenement building. It was, you wouldn't have got another white person to live in there. By white, I mean, Western expat, or guailos as the Chinese called us, foreign or ghost men, they would call us. And you wouldn't have got another expat living there, but I loved it. I loved being right in amongst the Chinese living. It was really, really old school. But I went back to that flat and I just smashed everything up. Everything I just smashed. I was just so angry at, how did my life sink to this? And that was it. And I came back to the UK. And I was still chronically addicted for another 18 months or so, certainly a year. Couldn't function on the drug, couldn't function off it. When I was off it, I would sink into this deep depression. I had no money because I spent all my money on amphetamines, and I'd leave myself like £1.87 to shop for 2 weeks. Then I have to buy all this, 3 kilo bag of porridge oats and 2 kilo bag of, supermarket pasta. And then I'd mix them together with 20 spoons of white sugar, chuck a splash of milk in because that's all I could afford, fill it with water, chuck it in a microwave. And that's what I lived on for 18 months, was just pasta and porridge, just to get some calories in me. I lost a tooth at that time because my body was just so, my tissues were so acidic. And that was that. And then one day I saw the light. And it was you could think of it as I'd step foot on the road to enlightenment. It was my first step. I remember it so well. The light was shining through the blinds. I was shivering cold. unconscious on the floor in my boxer shorts, where I just crashed out after probably a 6 or 7 day binge or something, and I didn't know who I was. I had to think, what's my name again? What's my name? Is it Chris what? Just couldn't remember. This is how just frazzled I was. And anyway, I wanted to go down the shop and get a pasty, because I lived in Devon, and I didn't want to go to the shop because I lived in Devon. Pasties from Devon and Cornwall, right? Or certainly from Cornwall, and I couldn't go outside. I'd just become too ashamed. I was dishevelled. The clothes I wore, I'd robbed them off a problematic heroin user, dealer that I knew, because he ripped me off, and I couldn't go out, and then nervous breakdown number 2 kicked in, and after crying my eyes out, I suddenly thought about that little boy that used to watch Tarzan, that little boy that went to 6 schools before the age of 11, that little boy that had to fight all the bullies because he wasn't afraid of no one, that little boy that got split up from his kid brother at these schools because he was a little kid and I was a big kid. We weren't allowed in the same playground, so we used to sit on the steps and hold hands just so it wasn't so lonely with all that divorce stuff going on, and thinking we're never going to see our daddy again. And I thought about that kid, and I thought about the things that I went through as a child that you would think no child should go through, and it just crashed me. Massive nervous breakdown again, and then I rose like a phoenix out the ashes. I thought, do you know what, Chris? Adults might not have treated that little boy the way that they should have done, but you can't change that. That's all done and dusted. It's made you the person that you are, and you're a good person. But moreover, who's abusing that little boy now? It's you, mate. You're literally shoving drugs in his arm, and you got to stop. So I made a promise in that moment, Andrew. I'd cut down my drug use. Rather than spend 80 quid a fortnight, which was all my benefit money, I'd just spend a tenner just to get it over and done with. I'd have my mad manic phase and where I think I'd get stuff done, but I never actually did. I just ended up smashing up my beautiful house that was pretty much brand new when I bought it. Only reason I kept the house is my dad and my uncle took over the mortgage payments while I was down and out and homeless ended up homeless in Hong Kong. And when I made that decision that I'm going to stop being a victim and I'm going to start taking charge of my life, and I saw that light shining through the blinds, I knew that I'd made a connection with a different realm in this universe. I knew that I connected with a higher form of energy, and I knew that my life would never be the same again.
I mean, such incredible, eloquently put insights, descriptions of life, both sort of falling into addiction, what life's like within addiction, and coming out. I mean, there's just so much there. Really, really interesting. And do you the historic addictions that you once had with crystal meth, do those still impact you today, or now is it very much like, when something happens in your life, you look back and it's almost like it was your life, but it wasn't, like it's so different today? Or do those addictions, do you still struggle with those addictions at all?
It depends what we define as struggle. If you mean have I voluntarily gone back down that road, not to the extent that I've just described to you, but I probably drunk more beer than pretty much most people on this planet. I I drank and I smoked weed and I party, week. Pretty much like loaded for 30 every day for 30 years. But I could function because I wasn't like off my head on crystal meth like I was back in the day. And then something magic happened. A wonderful woman came into my life, and I realized I was in love. And you know, it came to me later on in life, and we started a relationship, and she was extremely accepting. And one day she came round and she said, I'm pregnant. And again, just another seminal life-changing moment. And the universe gave me the most beautiful, handsome little boy that I just can't believe he's mine. If I was honest, he's the boy to my Tarzan that I always dreamed about. And it was at that point I realised I had to start making some changes. I'd lived an adventurous life. My addictions had never held me back from travelling, like you said, 85 countries across all 7 continents. A qualified pilot, qualified skydiver, taught street kids in Mozambique. I've written, I think, 6 books. I have a extremely popular YouTube channel. I have great life coaching clients, and life is what you make it. And I've never felt, I have a rule ever since those cold, dark days. I never will, will never play the victim, and I never feel sorry for myself. And what happened is, as I started to tread the esoteric journey even more, so this is the enlightenment journey, finding out the truth in life, and I started to listen to certain podcasts that I felt were giving me the answers and shedding light on, for example, what are the scriptures, what really are they, not what the churches tell you, all this gobbledygook about people walking on water and all this nonsense. What is the allegory behind that story? What are they trying to say? And that led me on to alchemy. Alchemy is the understanding that we're all energy, vibration, and frequency. Essentially, goes back to your Nikola Tesla, and then back even further to your sort of ancient Eastern philosophy and wisdom. And I started to learn that life is an energy field, and that you can adapt that field to suit your purpose if you understand a certain set of rules. And that if you understand those rules, you then control the chemicals that flow around your body, things like serotonin, dopamine, DMT, referred to in scripture as milk and honey, hence you enter paradise, the land of milk and honey. And that's the place I live now, Andrew. I wake up every day in paradise. I genuinely, I would say I'm the most luckiest man on this planet, and I've led one hell of a life, but I'd be a liar, because the irony is that I don't exist and the past doesn't exist. We just have this present moment. I'm not me and you are not you. We're the universe experiencing itself subjectively through energy, vibration, and frequency. And for anyone listening, if this is new to you, you're not supposed to understand a single thing I just said. That is absolutely fine. But what I will say is, if you have niggles in your life, if you have challenges, if you have mental health conditions, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, whatever it might be, if you're a jealous person, if you're materialistic, and you're starting to realize that it doesn't matter how fast a car you drive or how many bedrooms that literally physically cannot make you, cannot allow you to enter paradise, then these are concepts that you must understand. because it's not until you detach from what's known as the 3D realm, which is the things you can see, feel, hear and touch, and you connect on the quantum realm, which is energy, vibration and frequency, that you can start to change your life into the direction that you want it to.
Yeah. So talk about your work. Tell me about your work today. What's sort of driving you in your work, and what's the main focus of your work today, Chris?
So my work today is twofold. My YouTube channel and my Bought the T-shirt podcast have traditionally taken up an awful lot of energy and resources. Every year I do a stunt for charity. So this year I ran the toughest foot race on the planet across the Sahara Desert to raise money for children, my friend's children's school in Africa. He rescues abused kids from the witch doctors, where they really, haven't got much of a future. I haven't written a book for a while because of my YouTube channel, and I coach people who want more from their lives, and we look at where their life is, and then we look at what is holding them back from not just a material 3D perspective, but also what's holding them back on the quantum level, on the spiritual level. So an example of that, Andrew, is we're hugely conditioned to live in the past, and as I just said, the past doesn't exist. If anyone out there thinks the past exists, go and try and get an apple from the fruit bowl when you was a kid. You're literally not going to be able to do it because it doesn't exist. And yet the irony is most people live in that past. Yeah. They either live in that past thinking that's their identity and that has shaped them, or they live in the future, and the future is anxiety. The future's not here either. It's not happened. So there's no point being anxious. You're squandering your precious divine energy.
Yeah, or I suppose there are some that live in the future where they have an impossible dream, like they buy the lottery ticket each week, and the hope that one day their numbers roll in is what sort of keeps them going, but they're fixated on a future that they're not really working towards. They're not putting the graft in to make it happen, but actually what matters is what you do today. That's what absolutely matters. I completely agree.
Yes, you nailed it. And it's just a crazy thing. If you'd said to me, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, or whatever, when I was still in the Royal Marines, that we'd be having this conversation now on such a scientific level, I would have just thought you're crazy. I wouldn't have understood what you would, what we're talking about. I would have thought it's some, I don't know, weird hippie stuff or something, and it's just the opposite. It's such a beautiful life when you break free of that, what we call the matrix, and you start being able to, guide the course of your own life and own your own thoughts rather than having the BBC do it for you.
Sure. So tell me, I want to talk about men, masculinity, but before I do that, I had promised our listeners, and I'm interested myself, I'm quite nosy like this, but I've done 12 hours on a bus in Mexico. I've done 24 hours coming up from Chamonix to London in a bus, which was just felt like forever. But a bus to India, just like, how long did that take, and what was it like being on a bus for that long?
So when I was working in Mozambique with the street children, the organisation, the charity that I work for, contacted me and said, Chris, would you drive a bus from Norway to India and back to take a team of people who are going to be writing articles about communities that live in poverty? So I thought, would I drive a bus to India and back? You are goddamn right I will drive a bus to India and back. Put my name down for that one, please. And that was it. That was it. We had to fundraise for all of our finances and stuff. So we sold postcards on the streets of Scandinavia, just explaining what our mission was, and people were very generous and quite high standard of living in Scandinavia, so they had a few quid to chuck at us, and we bought this knackered old British Leyland bus. It was in fact, to be honest, I think the school already owned it by the time I got there, and it was a banger. It shouldn't really have been allowed on the road for the simple reason it broke down almost every day. I mean, we didn't even get out of Norway before. I think we got into Sweden when it first broke down. In fact, no, I remember driving along in Norway thinking, this steering isn't right. It's just all over the shop, and stopping in Germany and realising that one of the back tyres had been, punctured for weeks and weeks. So, cut a long story short, yeah, we drove down through Norway, Sweden, Germany, Austria, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, and then India. We had 3 weeks when we got there, and so I went to, it's a bit of a shame really, but I went to see my brother in Thailand because, as you probably gathered, I miss my little brother. He was working in Bangkok at the time. And then we got back on board and we drove back through the deserts and back through Europe to home.
Wow. And how, did everyone get on okay in the confines of a bus for that time?
It's probably not a good mix to have a kind of headstrong ex-Marine with let's just say some more kind of hippie types who just seem to think that the washing up would do itself. And I was, pretty driven, pretty determined. I mean, we drove back across. I drove from the Iranian border. I drove from the Iranian border into Istanbul. So that's, God knows, that's like 2,000 miles or something. It's quite a way, and I drove that non-stop. It took 48 hours just non-stop driving. I think we stopped once for a toilet break. I remember driving across the desert. Everyone on the bus was asleep in Pakistan, and there was a sandstorm, and the sand was blowing across the road. And I was just driving along, listening to Massive Attack, chain smoking rollies, and drinking coffee, and it was just one of the best moments of my best memories of, we say the past doesn't exist, but you are allowed to take, the good memories from it. And that was amazing. We drove across the Baluchistan desert, which I think it borders Pakistan. It doesn't really matter, but it's part of the desert in Pakistan. And a fellow bus driver sort of pulled us over, and he came on our bus and he said, "Right, are you going across the Baluchistan?" And we're like, "Yes." It's sort of 200 miles of desert in front of us. He said, what weapons have you got? We're like, "Sorry?" It's like, this is bandit country. They're gonna, if you can't fight, they're gonna take everything. They'll take your women, they'll take all your valuables, they'll shoot you guys, and then they'll take your bus. And I remember looking at the washing up bar and thinking, well, we've got a carving knife. So he said, "Don't worry, we're loaded up. You just follow us." So we hammered after this bus, and we were doing all right for the first 5 miles. We got up to about 55 mile an hour, which was supersonic for our old banger. And then suddenly one of our diesel pipes cracked off the piston, off the cylinder block, of the cylinder it was on, and it starts spraying diesel everywhere. And we slowed down to about 12 mile an hour. So we had to drive across the most notorious bandit country in the Middle East at 12 mile an hour for 185 miles, I think it was. Yeah, that was what
Great story.
that was what it was like.
Yeah. So tell we hear about toxic masculinity today. We hear about men behaving badly, misogyny, Andrew Tate and his influence, a lot of worried parents. I mean, is masculinity inherently toxic? Do you think the phrase toxic masculinity is actually more of a wall builder than a bridge builder?
Oh gosh, it's not really something I think that really needs to be discussed. I mean, I've got to 54 years old without ever having to use the word. I mean, I can tell you what's going on. If you understand the New World Order, there's an agenda in place to divide everybody. Division. It's why you see groups like Black Lives Matter are funded, whereas once you understand the quantum nature of life, we are all one. We're essentially, carbon molecules held together by energy. So you are me, Andrew, and I'm you. We're just the universe experiencing itself subjectively. So the notion that I would go to war with you or fight you is so ridiculously, nonsensically stupid that any enlightened person understands this is the challenge that humanity has been set. It's like there was a god up there sat on his bloody cloud, or sat in his void. There was nothing. He decides to create this universe, and he just does it for the sole purpose of saying, look, this is going to evolve. It's going to be this series of random evolutions and mutations. Will intelligent life ever form? Will that intelligent life ever get to a place where it understands that it is me? This is why you see Jesus, the only way to the Father is through me. We are made in the image of the Creator. I'm not being religious here, Andrew. I'm not religious in any way, shape or form, and never will be. I'm talking about quantum physics. So that's why people are talking about masculinity and that kind of thing. Is it toxic? Well, it's toxic when it becomes abusive to other human beings. The notion of being a man's man, it's always done me all right. I always want to lead from the front. I'm in an aeroplane skydiving. I'm always going to be the first person out the door. I was always the first person in the stick to go out the Hercules when we parachuted in the military. I wouldn't say that. I'd say that's just maybe more bravado and getting experiences under your belt in life. Where it becomes toxic is, like I say, where it becomes abusive, but also, like, have you ever heard Andrew Tate talking about energy, vibration and frequency? Because to be a warrior, these are the concepts you've got to understand. It's just that simple. Somebody has to be understanding this, Andrew. The kids can't stick up for themselves against these psychopaths. Anyone that's aware of what's been going on this last 3 years knows it's incredible. For evil to flourish, good people do nothing, and that's kind of what we saw, with the exception of very few of us during this agenda. And it's in order to really function there and make a difference and make the changes, like I say, you have to make them on the quantum level. And Andrew Tate prides himself on being against the matrix, but like he is really, even though I like a lot of what he says, he there's also a big part of his character which is essentially right in the matrix. Materialism, it's not going to make you happy. Smoke as many cigars as you like, all it's really going to do is toxify your body. it's a blocker. Anything you put between you and spirit, you and the universe, acts as a blocker. Religion is a blocker. Drugs and alcohol is a blocker. It literally prevents the chemicals in your body doing that which they need to do. And you don't hear Andrew Tate talking about this. And the fact that young men will look up to him and think that driving a fast car is in some way going to make them happy, or taking a stern hand in a relationship, which really should be based on equality and love. Because again, when you understand life at the quantum level, you know that there's the masculine and feminine, but both of those qualities lies within us. So we're only men in the 3D realm. Above that, you're masculine and feminine, you're the positive and negative, you're the yin and the yang. So I wouldn't be getting too het up about that when I just say get out, live your life, love all people, demand, never take second best for yourself, don't get involved in these nonsense divisive arguments, because that's what they're there to do. And get out. I always say, in this set of molecules you get one life, and if you live it right, one is enough.
Yeah, and I think there's so much in that, because and you've really answered the question I was going to ask in terms of helping men and boys. I mean, what you've just said is a wonderful concluding message, I think, to encourage men and boys. And whether you're someone listening to this that is in agreement, and you believe in the quantum physics and that side of things, whether you see yourself as just someone that, well, I am religious and I'm spiritual, there's so much in what you've said that I think we can relate to. I personally think that people are inherently good. I don't know if you've read Rutger Bregman's Humankind book, that kind of makes a point that if you look back thousands of years, where before we were settling down, when we were more nomadic, you go back beyond sort of 5,000 years BC, looking at the bones that are dug up, there seems to be no evidence of warfare. That's the main premise of the book, that actually has civilization created a life that actually people don't suit so well that before. Why has war been a relatively recent phenomenon, which is an interesting way of looking at it, actually, and an interesting thought. But I think the way you've sort of responded to the Andrew Tate question is really insightful. I think men and boys look up to him because they think he's this big tough chap. He's got this bling lifestyle. He seems to speak to them, many men who are sort of disaffected and feel like society is against them. But of course, so much of what Andrew Tate says himself is abusive and not helpful in any way, shape or form. So just to conclude, a final message of encouragement to the men and boys listening to this podcast. If you could give them, sort of encapsulate that in a couple of sentences, what would you say?
I'd say, remember, you are massively loved, way more than you probably realise. I love you unconditionally. My crew massively loves you. And the universe loves you because you are the universe. And the sooner you realise that and rise above life's petty nonsenses and stop living in the past, because it doesn't exist. If you don't believe me, try and get the apple from that fruit bowl. You won't be able to do it. Don't live in the future. You live in a moment, you live in a now. And that's when you make your peace, when you can shut your eyes, switch on your pineal gland, you make that connection with the divine, and that's what's going to bring you bring you your answers in life. Get out there, don't take second best, dream big, always dream. I dreamt to be Tarzan. Lo and behold, at 35 years old, I'm living in the Amazon rainforest. I'm catching piranhas out the Amazon River to eat. I'm walking around with a machete, I chose that life. I chose never to let anybody steal my dream. I watched the Elvis movies as a kid, the year Elvis died. One of them was called I think it was called Loco in Acapulco or something, where Elvis went down to Acapulco and he did the infamous dive off the Acapulco cliff. And I thought, watching that as a kid, I'm going to do that one day. I'm going to be a hero like Elvis. And lo and behold, one day I rocked up in Acapulco. The first place I went was down to that cliff. The first person I met was actually one of the cliff divers, because I was having a nosy around their changing room. And I introduced myself. I spoke a bit of I've been in Africa speaking Portuguese, so I had changed it to a bit of fractured Spanish. And he looked at me and said, vamos nadar. He says, let's go for a swim. I'm like, okay, does he mean in the local hotel swimming pool, I suppose? So I thought he was going to lead me to the swimming pool. No, he starts heading down to the cliff, peels off his shirt, dives into this tidal lagoon, and or a sort of cove. Anyone that knows this experience knows what I mean. And that was it. I'm peeling off my shirt and I'm diving into that lagoon. The lagoon I've dreamt of since I think I was 7 years old when Elvis died. I've been dreaming of this for 28 years. I swam across the lagoon. There's a monster tide coming in and out, or monster waves, but I just bided my time, and a wave lifted me up. I grabbed the cliff and I climbed up it just like Elvis had done. I won't say I climbed all the way to the top. I wasn't bothered about that. Plus I probably would have killed myself. But I climbed up as high as I dared, and then I turned around and I did the perfect swallow dive. And this is why no one can ever tell me life is just not absolutely brilliant. And it's the life there for anyone to choose.
So life is brilliant. Never stop dreaming, but do live in the present to make it happen. And the past doesn't really exist because it's gone.
Perfect.
Cool. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've so enjoyed having you on the podcast today. So much in there. It's just so interesting. I feel like I could talk to you and listen to your life story for literally hours. But need to wrap it up. Thanks so much for being a guest. We wish you the best.
No problem. Much love to you, Andrew, and to all of your listeners.